everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders podcast. I am Deshaun Whip Dog Whipple, and I'm here with my partner, devastating Daryl Pace.
Hello, welcome everybody.
Daryl, what's going on, man? I see you back in the control center, bro.
Oh, I'm back in the control center, but I'm here for a special reason this week because of our guest. So I am very happy and pleased to be here this week in the control center.
Oh, yeah, we got an amazing guest this week, and we're going to go right to him. As you can see, I got some red and black on. You're in the control center. That means we're going back in time a little bit. We're going to talk to one of the greatest commentators / announcers in the wrestling business from the World Championship Wrestling Monday Night Wars era. Welcome, Scott Hudson. How you doing, man?
Oh man, you're talking about me? You said one of the greatest. You said one of the greatest commentators. My God, who's coming in? I haven't got parking. Thank you so much, Daryl and Deshaun. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be a part of the Whip family. Please, I'm honored already. You've got the job.
Oh, well, thank you, man. Thanks. Sounds good, man. We've been practicing this. So, and to our listeners, if you're watching this later on or listening later on, this is still during the COVID-19 quarantine season. So, yeah, if our questions talk about that, you guys know what it is.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, Scott, how are you holding up in all this quarantine down there in beautiful Georgia?
Well, honestly, guys, I have a shoot job that's been kind of my gimmick, I guess, all along, was that I had a real job, and I've been working from home 4 days out of 5 a week for 7 weeks. My wife has as well. We're both in different areas of the law. We're both in different cities. She works down in Macon for an employment law firm. I work in criminal law in Atlanta. So we have been working from home. Again, I think this is the end, as we record this, as we video this, the coming up on the end of the 7th week. So I'm ready to get the hell back to my office, to be honest with you. I love my wife, but my God, man, I want to see other people, you know.
He works with guys.
Don't tell her that.
He works with, not see other people.
No, not see other people. You're right. That's a good point. Not see other people, but see other people. You know what I'm saying.
The first live divorce here on the show.
So, Scott, I've watched you for many years, man. But I was doing some research, and whenever you do research, you learn stuff you didn't know. So
oh,
you
God.
did some work in Global Wrestling Federation as well?
I did. 30 years ago, when you guys were still in diapers, I guess, that was really my first break. When I moved to Atlanta, I had been doing radio for, down in South Georgia, where I'm from, deep South Georgia, almost to Florida. When I moved to Atlanta with my job, I've been a mark since 1970, which I know is before you guys' time. But I moved to Atlanta, and Atlanta was the hub of wrestling back in the late 80s. Met a couple of guys and, said, hey, I've been in radio, and the magic words in wrestling, I'll work for free. And they said, you're hired. And off we go. And yeah, I got into Global with Joe Pedicino, who passed away about a month ago, I guess, who was just my mentor and the man that gave me my break in the business. He and his wife, Bonnie Blackstone, who is just an angel on earth. They, back in 1989, early 1990, broke me in. Quickly, the story. My best friend and I, Steve Prazak, who was Steve Prazak in ECW, we went to a show, I think out in Carrollton, that Joe Pedicino had promoted, and the ring announcer, I mean, if you guys think, go out and get as drunk and high as you want and try to ring announce, you would have done 1,000 times better than this guy, and he was straight and sober. He called everybody by the wrong name. be called women by men's names, masked guys by unmasked guys' names. And so when it was over, I went up to Joe, who I did not know, and I just said, look, I don't know what you're paying this fuck up, but I'll do it for nothing. He said, you're hired. And that was it. And Joe passed away about a month ago. So I want to make sure I say that for better or for worse, he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, and gave me a break back in, again, early 1990. And so, yeah, 30 years ago, and got me into global and everything else.
How was your time out there in global, man? Because global was getting a little bit of traction back in the day.
Okay, here we go. And I'll make this quick because I know we're short on time, and I won't bore you with the gory details. But without offending, how old are you guys?
I'll be 40 this year. I'm 39 now.
You're 40?
43, so but I remember global pretty well.
Yes.
Okay, so, but back then you were young.
Yes.
There was a thing about that was making the rounds called the Nigerian scam. That wasn't, it was in the pre-internet days, pre-email days. It was all done by letters. And Joe fell for that, straight up. That I've got, I think for Joe, it was $25 million in cash on a boat that is supposed to be allowed to make port in Nigeria, but I don't have the money to pay the taxes. If you could send me money to pay the taxes, I'll give you half of the money. I don't know if you got that. That's ringing true.
I've heard that.
Well, this was like in the early days. Well, Joe fell for that without giving the guy any money. And Joe basically said, well, I can't give you the money, but I'll let you buy into this wrestling idea I've got. So that was it. Joe thought he had $25 million to start a wrestling company, and we had ESPN clearance, we had domestic syndication clearance, we had international syndication clearance, we had the Sportatorium in Dallas, Texas, which we renamed the Global Dome, and we had money to give talent, and that was it. And when that money didn't pan out, he had to go scramble in like a week to go find other investors, and he found them. He was a great salesman, and we got global off the ground despite this guy. His name, or the name he gave, was Olu Oliami. I have no idea what his real name was, but I do know this: he had a hot girlfriend.
Nice.
Straight up, because he and her came to Joe's house to watch a WWF then pay-per-view, and they showed up and he introduced us, and I'm like, that's one of the best looking women I've ever seen in my entire life. I have, whatever, you're rich, good luck, but God, you've got a hot girlfriend. And that was the end of that. But that's how global started.
So you worked with a lot of those young talent, and I got some WCW on back here right now. And
I'm sorry about that.
Oh man, see, we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there, man. We got Booker T in the ring now. So
I love Booker. Booker's the great. Booker's awesome.
We've had Stevie Ray on the show also before, and so I gotta ask you. You saw a lot of these guys when they were coming up, man.
Yeah.
Did you think guys like Booker T and Stevie Ray, the Dingo Warrior, aka Warrior, were going on to be as big stars as they were?
Well, now Dingo was already gone.
Okay.
Straight up.
Austin,
When
right?
I got to global, Steve Austin, you're right. Daryl, Steve Austin was there. Oh my God. Lightning Kid, who was 6-pack, 1, 2, 3 kid. Sean Waltman was there. Jerry Lynn was there. Cactus Jack. Terry Gordy had already been in the business for 10 years, but Buff Bagwell was there. We called him Scott Anthony. Scott Levy, who ended up being Raven. All those guys were out there, and we all learned together. We were all new to the business. We were all just learning from the ground up. We were kids. I mean, I'm an old guy now. I'm 55 years old, but back then I was 25 years old, and we were all learning, just skulls full of mush, as it were, just learning the business. And we were learning from veterans like Muckin Singh, Mike Shaw, God rest his soul. He's passed on. Rip Rogers, who was a fantastic hand and a great teacher, but those guys and Joe Pedicino were teaching us the business while we were out there.
Now, while you were in Global, were you just doing, ring announcing? How did you move into like the commentary?
Okay. Well, since you ask, and this will fill up the rest of the 2 hours we've got, so hang on.
Just like the WCW show. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm from South Georgia. I did radio for years. Like, I don't know if you guys remember radio when it used to mean something, but I was a disc jockey playing country music, adult contemporary, rock and roll. I did high school, college, sports play-by-play all throughout the 80s. And when I got out to, or when I moved to Atlanta, rather, I had a real job in criminal law. I wasn't interested, and that was a side. And so I thought, well, maybe I'll find something maybe I want. But then I got up there with Joe, and he put me on his 8-hour Saturday night wrestling block. I don't know if you guys have heard about that, but in Atlanta from maybe 1986 until 1991, you could watch 8 hours of wrestling on television on either channel 36 and then on channel 69 in Atlanta. You would get a WCW syndicated show, a WWF syndicated show, Memphis, Puerto Rico, and the Georgia Independent show, and the Pacific Northwest, Don Owens promotion. You would get all of those shows, one right after the other on Saturday night. So that's how I learned the business. And I married up calling legitimate sports with being a mark for the business and learned how to call wrestling.
So you moved on and get to WCW. How did that connection come?
Okay. See, we should have rehearsed this because that's another 4-hour story.
Oh man, we got time, baby. The clock is going. It's on you. No shot
right.
clock here.
In my shoot job, and you know what that means. I have a shoot job in criminal law, completely separate from wrestling, that I love, and I have great people that I work with, and still do. That's still my job now. In December of 1995, we were at our holiday luncheon at a nice restaurant in Atlanta, and I somehow stumbled into being Employee of the Year. Okay, so they gave me the award, and it's this nice place. Everybody's dressed up, and I got the award, shook the hand of the big boss, and got my award and sat back down. It was a really nice thing. And then, oh my God, is that Mike Awesome? Is that 70s guy? Jesus Christ. Oh my God, poor Mike. Anyway, so I sat back down at my table, and the maitre d' guy, remember this is 1995, no cell phones. And the maitre d' guy comes up and says, "Are you Mr. Hudson?" I said, "I am." He said, "I've got a call for you at the maitre d' stand." Okay, I've never had that happen in my life. I go over there. I said, "Hey, this is Scott." And I heard, "Yo, Scooter, this is DDP." And it was Paige, who I had gotten to know because we were doing the Georgia stuff and the global stuff. And he goes, "I got somebody that wants to talk to you." And it was Eric Bischoff. And I'd never met Eric. And he said, I've seen your work. I think we've got an opening, and I'd like for you to come in and audition with us.
Hold on one second.
Oh, we blipped for a second. You left off at Eric Bischoff, and then we lost you for 1 second.
I'm sorry. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we got you now.
That was it. Eric called and said, "We want you to come audition next Tuesday." So I went from being Employee of the Year at my real job to getting a call from Eric Bischoff in like 2 minutes, and then went and interviewed the next day. That was a great fucking day. Sorry if I'm not supposed to say that. That was a great day.
Now, do you remember the opening? What happened? You know the story behind the opening. That is a new show, or was somebody get the axe? What happened?
For what Eric was telling me,
Yeah.
I walk in, and have you guys ever been to Atlanta
Yes.
or
I have.
anything? There, the CNN Center,
Mhm.
which is right downtown, across the street from my office, my real shoot office. There used to be a WCW facade in the ground floor of CNN Center. It wasn't the office, it was just the production facility. So that's where I went. I sat in there for what Eric had called me in for. And I sat there for 15, 20 minutes that next Tuesday. And Keith Mitchell, who was with World Class back in the 80s, and just the greatest guy ever. I swear by him. He stuck his head out after about 20 minutes. He goes, "Are you Scott?" I said, "I am." He said, "Hang on, I'll call you in a minute." Super. That was all I needed to know. They knew I was there. There was no receptionist. And, 10 minutes later, Keith stuck his head out and said, "Okay, Scott, come on in." And I'm dressed up because I'd been at my office. I'm in a suit, like you do, working, in the law. And so I looked okay. And I walked in through that door, and I was on the set of WCW Pro. No idea. There was the backdrop, the cameras, and there stood Bobby Heenan that I'd never met in my life. And I'm a huge Bobby Heenan fan. And I introduced myself and said, "Mr. Heenan, I'm Scott Hudson. Nice to meet you." He goes, "Oh, good luck. Let's see how this goes." "Yes, sir. We'll make this happen." Keith Mitchell says, "All right, you two, you have to pitch to, or you're going to do the live open for WCW Pro, pump up the pay-per-view," which I was supposed to just know. And I did, thank God. And then pitch to the ring. It doesn't matter what match you pitch to, just pitch to a match in the ring. You have 90 seconds. And 4, 3, 2, and that was it. That was all I had. And we did it in one take.
Nice.
And when I did that in one take, they were like, "You can handle the pressure. You're hired."
Wow.
That's the way it goes.
Wow. Now I got to ask you, man. You were there during that time. WCW was about right here, but they were going. Yeah, they were skyrocketing.
Yeah.
When the ship start, as Warrior used to say, the rocket ship start taking off.
Yeah.
How was it like being there, backstage, the fans, just everything? How was it when it really started taking off?
That's a great question. And the reason I say that is because we didn't know. We knew what the booking was going to be. We knew what we would see when we were doing. At the time, I was doing WCW Pro and some international stuff that didn't air, obviously, in the United States. I mean, nobody knew who I was, but at least I knew what was going on. And then we get to June, July, when Hogan becomes the third man in the NWO with Scott and Kevin. And, we knew that was coming, but obviously we couldn't say anything. But Eric had told us, what to expect. And this was all Eric. I know Eric gets a lot of heat, but Eric Bischoff is a genius. Eric always had it in his head that he wanted to have what he called the umbrella angle, and everything else worked underneath it. And for Eric, the umbrella angle was the NWO. And when he built that up with Scott and Kevin, and then Hulk, and then Shawn and DiBiase and whoever else came in, everything worked underneath that. And it was easy. It was just so easy to see the long view. When he sold it to us and said, "This is going to happen," it happened just like he said. So it was great. We all believed. I don't want to equate it to any kind of religion, but we were all, amen, amen, preacher, amen. We were all in.
Because, it had to be amazing, like you just said. They were wearing NWO T-shirts, filling up the arena on the other side.
That's correct. That's exactly right.
So backstage, y'all feeling good. How many bottles of champagne were y'all drinking?
0 for me. I had to get back to work the next day. I can't show up at the courthouse, half in the bag, but everybody else. I'll tell you a quick story. This goes on 3 or 4 years later, and I'm not knocking the guy because it's a sweetheart and a good worker and fun to work with. But Bobby Duncombe Jr., who was part of the West Texas Rednecks with Kurt and Kendall and Barry, I would have to get up, do Nitro Monday night. I would go straight back to the hotel and go to bed because I would get up and catch a 6 o'clock flight to get back to the office and do my real job on Tuesday morning. So I would get up at 4 o'clock and go to the airport. And I remember once, God knows where we were. It could have been anywhere. I remember getting up, putting on my suit because I had to go to the office. I'm dressed up and got all my stuff together. And I'm walking down to the hotel, to the elevator, and I hit the lobby and I go down. Nobody's there. I mean, it's 4 o'clock in the fucking morning. Nobody's there. And I get down to the lobby level and the door opens and Bobby walks in for like 4:30 in the morning. He's just coming back from wherever the hell he's been, and I'm leaving to go home. But that's the way, and I'm not knocking Bobby. He was great. He's since passed away, and he was God rest his soul. But that's how it was. I'm trying to, just play both ends against the middle and have a normal job working for you guys. I work for the federal government. I work in federal criminal law. And, that I'm walking out as Bobby's walking in. That's what it was like every week.
Now, question, because, history is written by the victors, right? So when you watch these WWF, WCW, videos, it always talks about the chaos and that WCW was out of control and everybody that worked there didn't want to work there. I mean, how was it from the insider? Like, how did you feel about going to work? Did you see all this chaos? It seemed like it was unstable.
You could see some of it on a scale of 1 to 10. And first off, you're correct. The winners get to write the history of the war. They won, they write the history. But the chaos that they refer to, if what they characterize it as is a 10, it was about a 3. But it wasn't a 0. There was some chaos. But for the most part, WCW died because of the purchase by America Online. God knows. That goes back to when you guys were in middle school, I guess. But America Online, is that still around? I mean, I guess it is.
The email address is, that's about it. At AOL.com, that's about it. But
yeah, exactly. When they bought Time Warner had bought Turner Broadcasting and WCW and all 3 or 4 years before, but that was what killed us. It wasn't that we were chaotic or we were paying Lanny Poffo $300,000 a year not to wrestle and, blah, 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 all that bullshit. That's true. But that wasn't why we went under. We went under because of the AOL buyout. And they hated us. They hated you, straight up. They hated the fans. They didn't want.
Because I still get upset about them buying WC. Well, yeah. Okay, let's go forward. I'm getting upset.
I'm still seeing poor Mike Awesome as the 70s guy. Can I tell you a quick Mike Awesome story?
Please do.
First off, Mike Awesome is incredible. A great talent, a great guy. He put up with that bullshit like, yes, sir, whatever you want. I love the 70s. Hallelujah. Where do I pick up my check? That was Mike Awesome. But before he did this gimmick, or maybe it was after, he did the Fat Chick Thriller, which, I mean, I'm not going to go out on a limb here, but I didn't mind that gimmick. We'll leave it at that, okay? But Mike comes out, and he's got these two I don't know, women of substantial carriage walking out with him when he's doing the gimmick. And we're announcing, and our announce position was directly opposite of the, and I'm doing this like I'm seeing it again, of the ramp. As he's coming down, we see these two big, God help them, big women coming down. And, you know, we're putting the character over in, you know, Skittles and sell the pay-per-view and whatever the hell else we're supposed to do. And during the match, he's working, who knows, Disco, Curtis Iakea, or Prince Iakea, or whoever. And this woman who's also really big comes out with a platter. And I mean, like one of these fucking like Morrison's cafeteria platters stacked to the roof of hamburgers, right? Cheeseburgers. And so the gimmick was, here she comes and she's like big, out of shape, carrying cheeseburgers to the ring. It was just to get the character over. Well, nobody had smartened up the security guys. So we knew it was coming, you know, on the format that Vince Russo had written, you know, big woman comes out with platter of hamburgers, you know, sell this as part of the gimmick. Okay, great. Well, she does, and we are, and all of a sudden one of the security guys just rushes her like fuck and knocks her and the burgers into next fucking month because they didn't know. They thought she was like somebody running the stage,
Wow.
which they are supposed to like kill them. But it was a work. It was part of the show. And we're like, look at this, Tony. Here comes this big woman with a platter full of, oh my God, Doug Dillinger just knocked her into the fourth row and hamburgers are flying all over the, you know, the Orange County Civic Center.
I literally was about to ask, was it Doug Dillinger? So
yeah. And it probably wasn't Doug, honestly. He was terrific, but that was one of my favorite Mike Awesome stories. And he's, you know, he's since passed away. But I remember when I would meet up with him, he thought that was one of the funniest things that ever happened to him in the business. A man who had had all kind of success. He loved that story. And I remember that I out of nowhere, just on the spur of the moment, I called her Nitro Girl Beef. Like beef, not pork, not chicken, but Nitro Girl Beef. Here comes Tony, my God, it's Nitro Girl Beef. Bringing a platter of burgers out for the fat chick Twilla, Mike Awesome. Holy shit, the security guy just ran her into the fourth row. So,
you see that, Daryl?
That's what it was like.
He kept putting it over, though. Even when it happened, he put it over.
Absolutely. I was trying to sell tickets. I was trying to sell Skittles. I was trying to put guys over. That was my job. It didn't matter if I knew the moves or the holes or anything. I wanted to make sure people cared about Mike, the fat girl with the plate of hamburgers, and the Skittles instant replay of the week.
You know, you bring up a great point, because we talked about this last show when we were talking about managers and the role they played. And then that's the other thing, is the announcers. I mean, because what your job is to, you know, help get these guys over, you know, mention the move or, you know, or a short story or something to get some interest, because they're not talking. You've got the mic, so you can kind of talk for them. And as I think as time has gone on, guys get less mic time. And so, you know, the announcers are really what's there. And how was that, you know, did some guys bring you stuff and you kind of sneak it in, or just come up with stuff on the fly? What was your working arrangement with the guys when it came to, you know, to being creative?
First off, let me say this. I love Eric. I love Vince Russo. They may not get along, but both of those guys I would follow into battle today. As we're recording this on May the 11th, 2020, I would follow them into battle today if they wanted to go. But the bottom line is, and one of the things they did wrong, and they probably will admit this, is start the scripted promos stuff, where they would write the promos out for the guys, and the guys would spend all afternoon memorizing their promos instead of just, you know, like Memphis or the old WWF or WCW or Georgia Championship, Florida, wherever, you know, go out and cut a promo and get this over and not script it. And that was the problem. They would script out Vince, Eric would script out the promos, and that sort of took some of the instant heat, oh my God, did he really just say that? Because they were so concerned that some of these guys would go off the rails and go into business for themselves. But that's what we were worried about, as we would see that stuff. Anyway, that's the problem. That's where that plays into it, is they had scripted promos. There was almost no spontaneity to it at all.
Well, I got a question behind that. You just touched base on Mr. Vince Russo. And before we go any further, this isn't the type of show where you got to trash anybody. We don't do that. We don't do that here. This is not one of those shoot interviews. But you just said you would go in a battle with Vince Russo. And as you know, he gets a lot of heat. He's still does 20-something years later.
Yeah. Could
you tell me how really was it working for Vince Russo?
He was terrific. He was great. Vince's issue, and he'll probably tell you this, is when he was in the WWF at the time, he would create stuff, he would write stuff, and it would have to go through the filter of Vince McMahon. Vince would say, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. This is good. This is good. We're not going to do that. That kind of thing. When he was in WCW, he had no filter. He could basically, whatever he said went. And some of the stuff that in 1999 and 2000 of WCW into early 2001, obviously, was stuff that Vince McMahon would have said, we're not going to do that. That doesn't make sense. Where Vince Russo just did it because he had no one to tell him not to. But again, we had come off, as famously as Eric's podcast says, 83 weeks of beating Raw like a drum in the Monday Night Wars. And then when we started losing, Vince was just trying anything to get us back close and maybe back on top to where we could start another 83-week run, and it didn't happen.
So now on that, as you know, WCW winds down, it feels like Eric Bischoff's going to buy the promotion. He's working with different investors.
Right.
I know it's key that that they have a show on TNT. You find out it's not.
Yeah.
What are you hearing during this? Like from that time, and then when the WWE buys it, like what's going on with you? Do you know if you have a job? I mean, I'm thinking about it. From my standpoint, do I have a job tomorrow? What's going on? Like, what's going on with you?
That's the perfect question. And the reason why is I had somewhere to go. I mean, I never left my shoot job. I've been doing that. This is 2020. I've been doing this in 85, 35 years. I've been doing this. I mean, I get to retire next year from this after doing it 36 years. Everybody else, wrestlers, they can go somewhere else. But the crew, the camera guy, the sound guy, the lighting guy, the grip, the guy setting up the ring, the guy traveling in semi-trucks all over the country week to week, they had no idea where they were going to go. And that was the problem is as we came toward the end, we kind of knew what was going on. I mean, I got my start. We didn't talk about this, but I got my start writing for the sheets, for the Wrestling Observer, for Pro Wrestling Torch, Observer with Dave Meltzer, the Torch with Wade Keller, Matt Watch with Steve Beverly, Arena Reports with Ron Lemieux. That's how I got my start in the mid-'80s. Learning the business was writing for the sheets. So I still did that. I knew what was going on, and I knew what the scuttlebutt was. When we showed up in Panama City Beach, March 27, 2001, I guess, we had heard that previous Thursday that I can't even think of what day that was, the 23rd, 24th, whatever it was, what was going to happen. We knew. And Tony Schiavone, who was the greatest of all time to me and still a wonderful friend as we sit here today. Parenthetically, if somebody actually with their smartphone recorded the roast of Tony Schiavone up in Baltimore last year that I was part of, find that video. I think it's like one of the lost videos of all time is the roast of Tony Schiavone, but forget all that. When Tony was my boss, Tony was not only an announcer, he was the producer of all television. So when we found out that previous Thursday what was going to happen, we knew that Monday night was going to be the end of WCW. And we went down to Club La Vila in Panama City Beach, which is only about a 4-hour drive from Atlanta. It's not far. It's where we go when we go to the beach. I mean, it's, 4 hours, leave work an hour early and you're there in time to have a good time and be back Sunday night. It's great. But we got down there and everything happened that you saw happen, Sting and Flair in the main, and the commentary that we did, we both knew that it was the last time we were going to say anything. So everything you heard on that commentary from that last Nitro was a shoot. Nobody gave us a promo. Nobody gave us anything. We didn't even know who was going over. Sting went over. We didn't even know that. And then when it was over, there was still an hour and a half left in the show that Vince was in charge of doing the simulcast with Raw from Cleveland. And Tony comes up to me backstage and says, what time's your flight? I said, it's like at 7 o'clock in the morning. He said, cancel it. Come ride with me. So at about 11 o'clock, I'd cancel my flight, and Tony Schiavone and I drove back from Panama City Beach to Atlanta and spent the whole 4 hours talking about wrestling, talking about Jim Crockett promotions, talking about Georgia Championship, talking about Global, talking about WCW, talking about WWE. It was just the greatest 4 hours in my wrestling life. And it was really, other than TNA, it was the last thing I did was get to spend 4 hours with Tony commiserating about how we both had been fucked by Vince McMahon,
For sure.
But he wasn't done with you yet, right?
So you called some of the matches of some of the greatest wrestlers ever. What was your favorite match you called, and who was your favorite worker of all time? Are they one and the same?
There is no way on earth I can tell you what my favorite match is. I'm sorry. I apologize, Daryl, Deshaun. I can't. Because I can't remember. Keep in mind that I was there through the NWO, but also, which was, not exactly, Luthez and Pat O'Connor when it comes to in-ring work, but it was so over. People throwing shit for 10 minutes after the match is over. And then also with Eddie and Dean and Chris and Jericho and Perry and the Luchadors and all of those guys working underneath. I couldn't pick one. But and Ray Jr., who apparently died last night at Money in the Bank. Sure, he's fine. But I get asked that question a lot, and my favorite two of all time, and I can never pick. If you call me next week, and you're welcome to, I might have in a different order, but I can never get tired of Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart. I just can watch those guys wrestle each other, which were fantastic, or wrestle Bastion Booger and whoever the hell else, and I just can't get tired of it. Those two guys were just incredible every time I saw them. But again, if they're number one and number two, tied for number three are Chris Benoit, despite what he did, and he's a bastard for what he did. He was a friend, and so was Nancy, but he was a fantastic wrestler. Perry Saturn, Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho, Eddie, any of the luchadors, Psicosis, Juventud, all of those guys that came up, and especially Ray Jr., those were always just the most fun guys to watch. Then you go back a little bit to Eddie Gilbert and Terry Funk, and of course Ric Flair, Arn Anderson. I can watch those guys and do. I mean, hell, we've all been in quarantine and whatever for how many weeks. I'm like, oh my God, I'm tired of working. Let me dial up YouTube and find an Arn Anderson match, and there he is working, Prince Iaukea or whoever, and it's still great. So there's a long list, but Brett and Sean, I just can't. I can never tire of those guys.
You bring up Arn Anderson, which is one of my I think he's going to get mentioned in every show. Dynamite Kid by me is going to be mentioned in every show.
Yeah.
Great worker, tremendous guy on a promo.
Yeah.
But he ends up. But I've never known him to do a lot of announcing. But he ends up being your co-host in one of your probably greatest moments in your career. We got to ask you. You got to know the story behind it. What happened? How was it approached to you, and what happened? What was the story?
It was Tacoma, Washington. Okay. If I'm looking at this, we're almost 40. You say we're doing 45 minutes. We might go over.
Okay.
I like be an hour and 45 minutes. My God, I've never realized how much Rick looked like David. And that
Right
thing
here,
behind
right
you,
there, yeah.
Jesus Christ, that's spooky. I thought that was David, but it's Rick. Anyway, they called me to do WWE television. Kevin Dunn called me and said, we've got an idea to do this invasion angle. I said, I don't want to do anything. No offense. Good luck. No, I'm not interested. And they, well, please. And I said, okay, what do you want me to do? We want you to bring you out to Tacoma, and we want you and Arn to be the voice of the new WCW, but it's a short-term thing. It's 2 weeks. It's okay. That 2 weeks I can do. I can't commit to 2 years or 10 years and whatever. But 2 weeks, yeah, sure. I love Tacoma. I love Arn. Let's go. So I go out there, and they told us what they were going to do with Booker and Buff. And they said, nobody knows who you are, me, which is fine. That's what nobody's supposed to know who I am. They're supposed to know who the guys are, right? But they know who Arn is. So we're going to have Shane introduce you and Arn, and we're going to have Stacy walk you out. And we'd worked with Stacy for, a couple of years in WCW, and she was terrific. But we're going to have her come out because she'll get a pop because she's gorgeous and her legs are 8 miles long and great. I said, super. So off we go. What do you want us to put over in the commentary? Whatever you want. We got no production. It was, this is WCW on Raw. It's supposed to be for the WCW title. Just sell it like a WCW match. Like, okay, we can do that. I can do that. Arn's never announced before. And I hold Arn Anderson, he's in my top 5 of all time guys. Personally and professionally. So I thought, this is the greatest thing I've ever had. And so when Booker and Buff come out, they bring us out. We shake Shane's hand. We do the whole, you can find it on YouTube, I guess, or the network. And we sit down. Great. They bring out Booker and Buff. We pump them up, and they get started, and they immediately go to like a side headlock or some bullshit, some kind of WCW Saturday night opening match working thing. Like, no, don't do that. Bounce off. You've only got like 8 minutes. Just go crazy. No, and they go to a side headlock and, all this shit. And we're like, oh my God. And I remember we have a notepad out there, and Arn writes, "This sucks," and slid it over to me. And I just looked at him. We weren't on camera. I'm like, you're damn right it does. And, you know, and they did exactly what they were told, Booker and Buff. But it was all meant to kill WCW. That's all it was. They were never supposed to come out and work the kind of match that they could. It was Booker and Buff, for God's sakes. They could tear down the house. If they had 8 minutes, that place would have been erupting with those two guys. But they came in, no, grab a headlock, grab like a leg scissors, go into a camel clutch. I mean,
Armbar.
Nobody cared. And I'll tell you this, and this is a testament to Arn Anderson, who was a consummate pro. And again, in the discussion of the greatest of all time, to me, when we came down that ramp, if you go back and watch that footage, when that match was over, that was the last match on that Raw in Tacoma. When we left, it's not on camera, we didn't go back up the ramp. We just walked beside the ramp, stayed on the floor level, and walked back behind the curtain and left. And when we're doing that, the show's over, and I looked over at Arn, and he's like somebody had grabbed him by both ankles and dipped him in a swimming pool. I mean, he's covered in sweat. And I just said, "Hey, are you okay?" And he just said, "I don't know how y'all do this, brother." And he had announced one match. And that was the greatest compliment I've ever had in my entire life. I don't know if he meant it as that. I'd like to think so, because I have so much respect for him. To May 11th, 2020, I think he's just in the discussion of the greatest of all time. That was just a huge compliment to me.
No, I got to jump in right quick. What would you tell a young guy that wants to be a part of the business, but he knows he's not built to be a wrestler, and he wants to go into announcing or broadcasting? What would you say to him?
Be a mark. I'm a mark. I never shy away from that term. Since 1970, again, when probably both of your parents were children, I've been a mark. I just, everything that would come up on that broadcast, from Columbus, Georgia, from Dothan, Alabama, from Tallahassee, Florida, Atlanta, Georgia, Macon, Georgia, those places all did television that I could see. And I remember standing up in front of my television with my grandfather, just screaming, and no, he can't get away with that, Granddaddy. Can he? He can't. No, don't let that happen. That's never left me. And if you're not a mark, don't start. Don't think you're going to get somewhere without having that passion. Most people are marks for football. I played football in high school and college, so I'm a mark for football, but it's not a work, obviously. You're out there killing yourself and beating yourself to death in a weight room and getting hammered every Saturday or Sunday. But on wrestling, it's every night. It's 300 nights a year. And just learning the art of selling the business, selling the sport. That's what I would suggest first. Be a mark, and then learn the business. Be a mark first, period. Number 2, learn the business. Learn from people like Jim Cornette. You can find Jimmy's doing all these Jim Cornette Experience YouTube things. You can find, thousands of hours of those things. Just sometimes he goes off on rants and stuff, and that's funny. But when he's talking about the business, learn that. Go back and find Vince Russo. Go back and find Eric Bischoff. Go back and find Arn Anderson. Arn Answers Everything with Conrad Thompson podcast, and learn the business. And then go find a small promotion and say the magic words, guys, write this down: I will work for free. And when you do that, then get the experience, and then you elevate yourself. Where the WWE has screwed up, they're going out. I mean, look at me. I mean, do I look like a guy that's going to sell posters and lunchboxes and, pinups and magazines? No, not hardly. I mean, I'm hardly some kind of, monster or ogre, but I'm not going to do that. And they're going out and finding people that look good instead of know how to sell the product. Learn, be a mark, learn the business, learn how to sell the product. And then if you want to go out and make sure you've got abs or, long hair, that ship has sailed years ago for me. But, something to make you stand out. But that's where the business needs to go. But again, Vince runs the business. So we'll see what happens.
You guys heard that. You got an exclusive right there. But if you want to get into the business from Mr. Hudson. So, Scott, and I'm going to ask you this also before we get out of here. We got a couple more questions.
Sure.
TNA, your TNA run. How do you feel about that? When they called you in to work TNA, did you think we're going to compete? This is WCW all over again, but we're going to win it this time. We're going to beat WWE, or did you just think it was just a fun time back with the boys?
That's an incredible question. And the answer is somewhere in between. I knew no way would we compete with the WWE, but I also knew that there was a void that needed to be filled. Ring of Honor had something of a foothold in that void, but they weren't what everything needed. There was nothing else. There was no MLW. ECW was gone. There was nothing else. So Jerry Jarrett and Jeff Jarrett and the Carters with Panda Energy put that together and brought it up. But here we are in 2020, and they started in 2002, 18 years, and they're still going, and they're still broadcasting. They're still running shows. When all this bullshit's over, they'll be back running shows like everybody else will be, live shows. So if somebody had put a gun to my head and said, will they be around in 2020? I would have said no. No, it's gonna peter out in 7 or 8 years, and it would have been a fun time, like you said, a fun time with the guys, and guys would have made money, whatever. But they're still here, so I'm thrilled. Same with AEW, with All Elite. Those guys have weathered the storm now for a couple of years too, so I'm impressed.
Now speaking of that, we've had people from ECW on the show, and we've had some Impact guys on the show. And even with WCW, whether people say positive or negative, and I was a big WCW mark myself, how does it feel 20-something years later that it's still a topic of conversation, man? Well,
that's a great question, and it's a testament to God, this is a horrible thing to say, but it's a testament to how bad the WWE is now. People will watch the WWE. They'll watch Money in the Bank last night. And again, depending on when you're watching this, Otis wins the Money in the Bank thing last night. That's not something that, God love him, that's not something that's going to draw money down the road. Can you see Otis selling out the Jaffa Mosque, with him versus whoever on top? That's not going to happen. But people will, back in the day, and you guys may have been part of this, that just used to shit all over WCW. Again, we were talking about, as I see behind you, the Mike Awesome 70s guy stuff. Like, oh my God, can you believe what they did to Mike Awesome? Like, that really wasn't that bad compared to what we're seeing now. And people will go back and watch WCW when they think we were at our lowest and say, it really wasn't that bad. I'll leave you with this, guys. When the Monday Night Wars were going on, when we were hot and heavy, the 83 weeks and then the weeks after that when the WWF was kicking our ass left and right, no matter who was on top, there were still about 9 million people watching wrestling on Monday night, okay? Sometimes we had 6 and they had 3, and then it flipped and we had 3 and they had 6. But there was about 9 million people out there that were willing to watch wrestling on Monday. When we went under, when AOL bought Time Warner and Jamie Kellner, who was a dickless wonder for the ages, and Brad Siegel, who is never had a dick wonder for the ages, comes in and destroys the company, and we're gone, and the WWF bought what was left of us, you would think, okay, well, the WWF is going to have 9 million people watching them. Oh my God, they're going to make so much money. And now they're down to less than 1.6 million people watching their show 18 years later.
If you combine all the shows from every organization, you're not going to hit anywhere close to half of 9 million.
That's exactly right. And what it was the competition. And AEW, God bless them, they're trying. They're doing great. Their stuff is phenomenal. TNA, Ring of Honor, not so much, but they're still at least giving it the old college try. Lucha Underground, God, when they were around, they were incredible. But, the WWF won the war, and famously, I don't know if you guys are students of political science or history, they won the war but didn't know how to win the peace. That they beat us like a drum, put us out of business, put everybody out of work, and then what people they brought up, say for Booker and Ray Jr., they killed them even if they brought them in. Now there's nothing left, and they're hurting. They're putting out press releases when there's 2 million viewers.
Right. Well, my last question before we get out of here with you.
You've threatened that already.
I know.
You have already threatened
it.
it. This is the last question.
I know you got to go eat. I know. I got to eat.
No, I'm all night. Whatever you want.
But I can't leave because we done heard too many of them from around the world. Give me a good Ric Flair story.
A good Ric Flair story?
Yeah, I know you got one, man. I know you got a good one.
Okay, well, I'll try to think of one that nobody's talked about. Okay. I cannot remember where this was. So please, have you guys ever been in the business at any level?
Yes.
Traveling.
I was an indie worker for many years.
Okay. Well, when you're on the road week after week after week, you forget where you are. So I have no idea where we were. But we would always stay in a very nice hotel. They would put us up. And when Nitro was over one night, for whatever reason, it must have been the West Coast, which means I would have had a later flight. So we'll limit it to that. So it's LA, San Diego, Frisco, Seattle, Vegas, somewhere out there. Nitro's over. We go to the hotel bar, okay? And you know how in the hotel bar or any bar really, you've got that one table that's like semicircle and it can hold like 15 people. Yep. It's huge. You know what I'm saying? I'm sitting in there and somehow I ended up sitting next to Flair. And it's elevated to a degree. Like somebody could come up and stand behind us on the floor and their head would be like at our shoulder. Okay? So I'm sitting there and we're drinking and Flair's buying for everybody. We're swapping stories and I don't think about it. It may have been Denver. Whatever. Anyway, I'm sitting there next to Rick and Gene Okerlund, the greatest character in the history of the sport. If we do a part 2 with this, we'll make it all about Gene. He's nuts. He's my favorite guy. Gene comes up and he's right between me and Flair as we're sitting in this thing laughing and cutting up, and Gene comes up and taps Rick on the shoulder and says, "Hey, Nature Boy." And of course, Rick, the cock of the walk, "Woo! Mean Gene! Woo!" And he spins around right here and says, "What's going on, Daddy?" And he said, "Nature Boy, I wanted to see if I could bum a Viagra. I think I got one of these stewardesses over at the bar biting." And so, of course, Rick, "Woo! woo, and reaches in his pocket, and gives him a Viagra, and Gene runs off.
Man, y'all got some exclusives right here, man. Well, Scott, thank you for your time. Right now, this is our closeout segment. We call it Ring the Bell. You got 60 seconds. You can promote. You can just say hi to the people, whatever you want to do. So, Scott Hudson, ring the bell. Let's go.
If you are a wrestling fan, please, I beg of you, support independent wrestling. If there are local guys running the VFW, the high school gym, wherever, a bar in town or a bar across town or in the next town, go see them. WWE, AEW, TNA, they're going to be okay. They've got huge money behind them. But as we come out of this pandemic, please go out and support independent wrestling. We need those guys to build the next generation of wrestlers, ring announcers, announcers for television. Please support independent wrestling in your local community. I can't stress that enough. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, man. Thank you very much for coming on the show. And we definitely got to do a part 2 sometime, bro.
I'll be honored. Anytime you
man.
want.
Take care, Scott.
All right, guys.
All right.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Daryl, another great show, man.
No, awesome. We definitely got to do a part 2. We got to figure out, we got to get a Bobby Heenan story. We definitely got to get
Oh, my God.
stories.
You see, Scott was supposed to get out of here. He's listening to us talk about it after the show. See how
Now,
he does,
see,
man?
I swear to God, this is water. But if we do a Bobby Heenan show, I'll tell you why you did not ever drink Heenan's water bottle at the announce table.
Y'all heard that. So that's why you need to make sure you subscribe to the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders podcast, because we got some amazing guys coming on each and every week. Follow us on Instagram at The Whip Show Podcast, Facebook, The Whip Show, and on YouTube. Well, we got to get out of here. For Deshaun, Whip Dog Whipple, and
Devastating Daryl Pace.
Scott Hudson, he's still there.
And Scott Hudson.
We will see you next time on the show. Take care, guys.
Take care.